jungler, and Swain is available for these teams if they do want to pick him up.
Yeah, very exciting. Potential Swain can come out this week. This guy, we don't want to run through all of his different abilities. Would highly recommend that if you don't know about the updated Swain, head over to the League of Legends YouTube channel. You can see all of his new abilities. But what I can tell you is he's very similar to Vladimir in how he plays during the laning phase. He loves to be obnoxious. He's very good against melee matchups. And when it gets to these mid to late game team fights, he can be so difficult to kill. Combine that with his burst, and he definitely has potential, but I don't know how much time a lot of these pros have invested in, especially when you consider he could be played both top and mid.
Not having the highest win rate in solo queue at the moment either.
Not right now,
so
not right now.
Depends if a top laner is willing to take a little bit of a gamble on him. At the moment, no gambles in the champion select. Sejuani Tristana removed by Giants, and it's Galio and the Kalista taken away by Splyce.
So, the fact that Giants have banned away the Caitlyn suggests that, along with the Tristana, imply that they're showing a lot of respect towards Kobbe, two of his most played AD carries, typically known for going towards the late game. It would then urge Splyce to head towards something like a Civet or a Kog'Maw, but Kog was nerfed on the most recent patch, taking a bit of a hit towards his late game W damage, which is really where the late game Kog'Maw comes into his own. We'll see what Splyce's AD carry comes to prioritize as Giants, like looking for an early mid laner in the form of Ryze, who also received a bit of a nerf this patch.
Yeah, you can no longer use the Realm Warp stopwatch combination. It is the Ryze for Betsy, but if you do stopwatch when you're in your ultimate, the whole ultimate gets cancelled. It's not that you just don't travel with it. If any of your teammates are there as well, they're going to stay stuck in place.
Flat out interrupts the ultimate. Meanwhile for Splyce, they're looking right now at potential junglers. Jarvan is available, also a slight nerf on this patch. Felt like we had a lot of little nerfs on this patch. We'll run through as they become apparent. But it looks like Splyce moving away from that hyper late game carry and instead focusing on perhaps a little bit more lane dominance with the Xayah.
That's not what we've seen from Splyce either, so maybe a bit of a change in their draft strategy here. Vedius putting a bit more dominance in the lane. There's the Zac as well for Xerxe, his second most played champion across the course of this split, and actually still has a 100% win rate on that with Splyce. So it's a good omen for Splyce thus far in the draft.
Definitely a big comfort pick for him. It allows him to be much more aggressive in the early game, given the unique jungle paths and gank routes that you can take on the Zac. And this guy was playing this champion last year when it wasn't even in the meta at all, so he's definitely very familiar with it. Giants now going to look to answer with a bit of a scaling top lane. I wouldn't be surprised if they locked in their jungler too. Could go for something like a Kha'Zix if they wanted a little bit more aggression, use the pushing mid and look to invade the enemy jungle, or maybe they go for a bit more utility in the form of something like a Jarvan.
I'm intrigued by the GangPlank pick so early on as well, because Ruin has been so good on the Gnar, with it still being up. Switching him over to something that he hasn't played at all this split seems a little bit risky from Giants, but we're getting towards the midpoint of the split, and this is where teams really have to continue to define themselves and to pick up these Ws. There's the Jax as well for Giants, so they've locked in that top half of the map.
Now Splyce yet to answer the mid lane pick. They could also just lock in themselves the support. Maybe they go for the Xayah Rakan. Perhaps they get themselves an early Tahm Kench. We know how popular he has been recently. Instead, they're going to focus up in the top lane, put Odoamne back on another carry in the Camille. We saw him bring this out last week against H2K, and when Nisqy was playing the Twisted Fate, they did play a lot more around towards the top side, and it was the first instance that we saw from Splyce really building themselves a pretty significant early game advantage, and then effectively closing out the game. So Splyce looking to pivot slightly from their typical style, and they will now have a pretty favorable matchup already in the top lane.
As we enter the second stage of picks and bans, both teams seem to have changed up their style a little bit. The Ziggs ban from Splyce and the Rakan ban from Giants, so they were expecting the same thing that we were with that Xayah Rakan bottom lane. But Giants still have their AD carry and support to pick, whereas Splyce are looking towards mid and that supporting role.
Yeah, by investing a ban on towards the Rakan, it does mean the Giants will lose an ability to limit the mid lane pool for Splyce. But you think about some of the mid laners that are left available as an answer to the Ryze, and you start to question what really is there. Zoe, still very strong on the current patch. She only received a slight nerf to her cooldown reduction, but Nisqy could look to bring it out, even though he hasn't yet. Alternatively, they could be looking at something like a Corki, the double AD carry composition, very safe in the middle lane. has the ability to pose a lot of threat.
I'm pretty sure Splyce is just having flashbacks to the last game they played because they removed the Thresh and the Ziggs on that second ban phase. They're like, no, we're never dealing with that bot lane again. Doesn't matter who we're playing, Vitality Giants, every time we're going to get rid of the Thresh and Ziggs. Now Splyce are looking towards that mid lane, and Victor was buffed on this patch. Could be something Splyce decide to pick up.
Right, potentially. We've heard of a varying number of builds, but that's why you can never talk about Hovers Medic, because they always get you at the last second. Orianna, we've seen a bit of it over in North America. Not really the strongest mid lane pick right now. We can go more depth into what she'll do in terms of this comp, but Splyce starting to build themselves a bit of a team fight comp. It's difficult because when you see the Camille, you sit there and think, oh, maybe they'll go for a 1-3-1 style of play. But by drafting the Orianna, you can't really send her off into a side lane. And when the enemy is drafting Twitch, it becomes much harder to play along those side lanes too, because you always run the risk of that sneaky AD carry showing up and creating a lot of chaos. So Splyce definitely edging more towards teamfight, whereas Giants are actually going more towards this 1-3-1 style with a pretty significant mid-game spike.
I have to see if they're able to play around that, because their mid games have notoriously been a part of the game that they lack pressure in, a part of the game where they actually lack the drive to make big plays. Early game is strong, late game is strong, but that mid game tends to fall behind. There's the Janna as well, so it's the Twitch Janna bottom lane, and Splyce are going to decide what support they want to answer this with.
Really want an extra bit of engage here. The thing about Janna is that if you've only got one source in the form of the Xayah, it can be very difficult to force fights, but I love this pickup. If Splyce choose to lock it in, think it is a great answer to the Janna.
Don't talk about hovers, Vedius. You taught it to me. There's the Lulu. No engage there.
It would have made so much sense. I think it would have been a great pickup. They're just going to match range supports for range supports. Bit of a rare occurrence for us, given the current meta. Melee supports seem to be all the rage, but now we are going to go for a bit more facilitation. The Camille dives in. You look at the combo paired up with the Lulu. Great follow-up from some of the engagements that Splyce have drafted for themselves, whereas Giants, they have a lot more disengage. They do have good scaling with the GangPlank, the Xerxe, and the Twitch, and they can make a lot of plays happen in the mid-game too, with the Ryze, the GangPlank Trinity Force, and with the Xerxe Trinity Force as well. You facilitate that with the Janna and the ability to just disengage any fights that Splyce try to force. And Giants are basically setting themselves up to say, you know what, as long as we can get through the early game, which you would imagine Splyce is not looking to try and force much of, we should be fine transitioning into the later stages and just splitting this Splyce team apart.
So then Splyce are looking to try and team fight on the other side of things.
As much as possible.
As much as possible, but it's going to be very hard for them to find the engages. We need to keep track of if Splyce are able to play around vision or maybe get those flanks off.
I mean, the big thing for Splyce is utilizing the Baron to draw the enemy in and force fights. Getting early leads in this game is actually going to be pretty important for Splyce, because if you can get Camille having side lane pressure very early on, it becomes a lot easier for you to create windows where you can set up for the Baron, set up for the Dragon, force Giants into these fights that maybe they're not ready to take in the 5 versus 5 situation. Eyes are going to be on Xerxe to see if he can match the typical early pressure that we do see from Djoko.
That's the comparison we really need to look at, because Djoko is so good at putting that early pressure down, getting his mid laner kills. Splyce have not been an early game team at all for the first half of this split. Maybe they're looking to start the change now. We're going to jump onto the Summoner's Rift. It's Giants versus Splyce, and it's the start of week 5. Vedius, I'm excited, the crowd's excited, you sound excited, and these teams are switching things up on us.
Yeah, really looking forward to this game. This is the final halfway point. After today's games, every team will start the rematch, the second, the opportunity. We've got some really exciting games coming up tomorrow along with today. EU very competitive right now. And just look at the score lines at the top of your screen. 5-3 for Giants, 4-4 for Splyce. These teams are all neck and neck. A win or a loss here could mean a lot in terms of moving up and down in the standings.
It could. And it's so important to continue to pick up wins, because losing every now and again near the start of the split, we saw, you know, Splyce didn't have the best of starts, Giants had a very good start, and that impacts, it's a snowball effect as you get towards these later weeks, especially if you're aiming for those top 6 spots. You really want to be able to get those wins on the board against teams that are close to you.
It's very true, and the way in which Giants will secure themselves that win is through their jungler. We've talked a lot about Djoko. We've We've talked a lot about how he loves to be aggressive in the early game. He's an individual that's very active, tries to make plays, and you can see that just from some of his statistics. Extremely high jungle proximity. This is the amount of time that he's spending around his laners. His kills plus assists at 15 is first in the league. This is not typically what you would expect from Djoko, considering his performance last year on Vitality. He made that one gank and then he never showed up again. He's being consistent in his early pressure, and it is allowing Giants to get early leads.
And someone that's actually benefiting a lot from this pressure from Djoko is Betsy in that mid lane. A lot of the time when Djoko goes aggressive, it's Betsy who follows up, who gets a kill off it. And you can see early on in the game, Betsy has some very good numbers. His kills and assists at 15-minute mark is the 3rd highest in the league.
And you can see just with the extra pressure that he's getting from his jungler, it's allowing him to be pretty lane dominant as well. You look at these two individuals, and many thought coming into the split that these two players were kind of washed up. They were just the leftovers that the Giants grabbed because there was no one really else to grab. But in a new environment, with new players, with a couple of rookies by their side, these two have really been able to step up on this roster and have really caught the attention of many other European players.
Because we're on 8.3, there have been a couple of changes to the UI on Spectator Vedius. I just want to bring one of them to the attention of everyone. If you look at the trinkets, it shows the vision score. So the big number in the middle is the vision score for the player, not how many trinkets they have left available. So if you look at Djoko, for example, right now, and you think, how has he got 3 warding totems available? He hasn't. He's got a vision score of 3, which is the highest in the game. So well done, Djoko. Great vision control from the Giants jungler.
Already investing in early vision. That's what you want from your junglers. And as we talked about Djoko, not wanting to Djoko around, looking to try and invest a bit.
You hated that pun.
I know, but I had to take it, didn't I? Now he's looking for an early gank up in the top lane, but he recognizes Ruin. Forced underneath his tower, can't really follow up on any kind of early plays.
You can see Odoamne is trying to do exactly that. Djoko will just a leap across into the bush and should be able to get away because Xerxe is on the other side of the map. We said that Djoko wants to put this early pressure on. Looks like he's looking towards the top lane, trying to help Ruin in a pretty difficult matchup, looking towards the mid as well to get Betsy ahead.
And speaking of that mid lane matchup, Orianna versus Ryze. No, guys, this is not Power of Evil. He is, in fact, over in North America. But he is an individual that still plays the champion in the current meta. And the thing about Ori is she's been known for a long time to be pretty obnoxious during the laning phase. Because of the range that she has on her QW combo, it can be quite difficult, especially for mid-range mages like Ryze, to trade back against her, especially when they're so skill shot based. So what you can do on an Ori is actually gain a lot of lane power, and put a lot of pressure down onto the Ryze, making it difficult for him to roam around the map. The issue is that she's pretty reliant on her items, and she's going to wait for a mid-game spike. We've got to talk about the bot.
Exhaust on Kobbe. There's the heal as well. He'll flash away from Djoko's counter-strike, and then we'll try and turn the damage back around. The root comes out with a Blade Caller, and Giants will get 2 summoners for that. Xerxe's trying to answer with a gank of his own, but it's just going to force him away. Djoko gets ignited. The flash in from Kasing. Jump away from Djoko. Stretching strike does not connect, but the first blood comes down for Splyce.
Xerxe answering the early gank from Djoko, and Splyce successfully punished Djoko for his typical tendencies. A lot of summoner spells were used, but this is the kind of start that Splyce wanted. We talked about how they needed to get these early leads on the side lanes, ideally on the Orianna as well, so that you can make things harder for Giants when trying to set up for this 1-3-1. And getting a successful counter gank like that is going to do wonders for this Splyce lineup.
And it shows, we talked about Djoko being aggressive, sometimes that can backfire. Oda's going to go in on the top side as well, but Ruin's just going to trade back into him with the parlay. Hasn't gone for the Relic Shield on the GangPlank here, instead going Corrupting Potion and Minion Dematerializer in that top lane to just try and get some push going on.
Just looking to try and survive mainly during the laning phase. GangPlank doesn't have the strongest setup, but let's have a look here. So early control ward came out from Giants. They wanted to set this one up. They knew that in a Twitch lane, especially against the Xayah Lulu, you're going to struggle. But then Djoko overcommits just a little bit. He wanted to try and get a summoner spell. He gets it. Now they need to back off. What they're not expecting is Xerxe to suddenly be there, and a very aggressive flash ignite coming out from Kasing. The follow-up from Xerxe was more than enough to secure the early kill, and Splyce now already sitting at a 1.4k gold lead. And
getting the lead down towards this bottom lane is so vital for Splyce as well. Kobbe has consistently been a carry for them. You can see 400 gold ahead on the AD carry now. Comparing Giants bot lane and Splyce's bot lane is not something you want to do if you're a Giants fan, because Steeelback has not been performing at the level you'd expect from an AD carry on such a high level roster.
I mean, they're 5-3. Giants have had a fantastic first half of the split. But you look at some of his stats and you're thinking his damage per minute is relatively low. His damage percentage in terms of what he's contributing overall to the team's damage is also very low. But his KDA is kind of high. You can make some assumptions and implications about those kind of statistics, which we're not going to make right now. But what we can say is that given the success of the team, you look at this individual and you see that he's not contributing or not stepping up as much as players like Betsy and Djoko have in terms of these team fights. Whereas you look across the board, Kobbe is the exact opposite. He's really the big carry for this Splyce lineup.
And already he has about a 20 CS lead in that bottom lane. Kobbe is ahead. Odoamne is ahead in the top lane as well. 15 farm or so. And 1,000 gold lead for Splyce 7 minutes in. We've criticized their early game in the past. This is looking a lot stronger from Splyce.
But remember what we said, Splyce, they drafted themselves a lot of winning lanes. Xayah, Lulu, very potent in the 2 versus 2, especially against the Twitch. Orianna typically does well into many mid lane matchups and is already starting to put a lot of pressure down onto Betsy. Combine that with the fact that GangPlank traditionally always has a weak laning phase, and Odo playing the Camille. Now we see another gank in mid.
Shockwave in mid. Betsy will be able to get away from the Glitter Lance. Doesn't quite fall. Has used the flash. And doesn't have a teleport to get back into the lane. Kasing now roaming on this Lulu, putting a lot of pressure down across the map.
Love these kind of plays from Kasing. In the past, he was known for playing a lot of playmakers like Thresh that really set his team up for success. And we haven't really seen that. He's invested a lot of time down towards the bot side. And speaking of bot, Steeelback already making his way up top. Very early swap around.
You talked about the roam potential of Twitch. You can just ambush into lanes like this. Going to force Odoamne away. Didn't have the level 6, so no spray and pray available for him. But Giants realize they're losing that bottom lane and immediately say, we need to trade out of this. We need to get an advantage on the other side of the map.
And this was something that Giants did a lot of in the early weeks of the regular season, where they would send Steeelback and Targamas up towards Ruin's lane, where he's already gotten himself a pretty significant lead. He has a lot of pushing power, and then the bot lane would just quickly come up, get themselves out of a bit of a rough laning phase and secure themselves a very early tower. They've now decided to mimic that, given how the early laning phase was going, and I think this was a smart answer from the side of Giants. Try and change things up considering how much you are struggling in the current 1v1s and 2v2s.
It's the argument when if you're losing a lane, sometimes there's no point staying and continuing to lose the lane. You get away, you get yourself something, they get first tower blood before Splyce are able to answer. It does give them a bit of an advantage. They're even looking for the second tower here, but Djoko's got a little bit deep onto Odoamne. We'll force him away for the time being. Might be a re-engage.
The thing is here that Djoko overcommits, takes way too much damage, and now they can't actually zone Odo from the tower, allowing Splyce to take away this infernal Drake. Will be a valuable early pick. Remember that they have drafted more towards team fight rather than anything of the split push variety that Giants have decided to go for, and this will obviously be a big benefit to the side of Splyce, especially if they're able to force these fights. Still holding on to a pretty significant early lead. But now that the map is a lot more open, how will Splyce look to answer? Will they try and keep the 2v2 the same? Or will they move Odoamne off into a 1v2 setup? I would expect Kobbe and Kasing to go up towards the top side and Odoamne to match against Ruin, but that bot lane is very far pushed in, and Ruin could look to try and set up a freeze. If this is the decision from Giants, the smart play now from Splyce is to move towards the Rift Herald, secure it for themselves, and either look for a play in mid or top.
Well, they're going to move up towards this top side. Kobbe spotted on the ward that Djoko used to jump on. With Rift Herald being available, you can look at it if you want to try and solidify some of these early gold leads. Splyce have about 1,200 gold ahead here. It's the largest gold difference they have ever had at the 10-minute mark.
This split.
This split. That's an important clarifier.
Yeah. Splyce have been in the league for a while. Very different roster, though, compared to the past. But you are right. This is a great start for Splyce. Very much playing towards the win conditions of their composition. Now Betsy looking for a bit of an early roam, but he will be spotted out on a ward.
Xerxe's going to jump onto him. Djoko's off towards the side as well. The blast cone stretching strike brings him back. There's the Orianna from the side as well, and the teleport coming in is cancelled by Ruin. Giants will not find the engage that they are looking for. Nisqy has Shockwave as well, but the CS advantage for Kobbe is just continuing to extend. Its 40 farm at the 11-minute mark, Vedius. That is a monumental lead for this Xayah, who is so strong when she gets a couple of items under her belt.
She definitely has a strong early to mid game. Her use of abilities and not reliance on big crit items to output damage allows her to make these kind of early plays. And against a Twitch who is very reliant on like the 3 items when he's got both the attack speed and the crit to set up for his spray and pray is really where he turns on. Splyce doing a good job of just taking advantage of that. Now they are setting up a bit of deep vision towards the top side of the map. And I feel like Splyce do have their eyes on the Rift Herald as we were discussing to try and put the pressure or continue the pressure down up against Giants.
And good vision control from Splyce. Good vision scores across the board as well. God, this thing is doubling Targamas' vision score.
But Djoko still far and away in the lead.
He's just too good, man.
Just too
good.
Aggressive with his wards. And that's a bit of a lesson to you guys at home. If you want to brag to your friends about how great of a jungler you are, you just say, hey, I was warding a lot in the early game, and now you have a vision score.
You've got a metric. You can ping it in game.
Oh, wow. That doesn't sound obnoxious at all. So Splyce looking to take an early tower up in the top side. This will be their second of the game, and they don't even need the Rift Tower for it, but it looks like they're going to get it as an extra bonus anyway. Yeah,
and getting the tower actually opens up a little bit more deep vision if they want to put it down, so it makes securing the Rift Herald a slight bit easier for them. You can see, although Splyce's early games up till now haven't been good, they know how to do an early game by the numbers, which is exactly what this is. Get bot tower, go top, get top tower, get Rift Herald, look for the mid tower. Step by step, they're continuing to extend their gold lead and extend the advantages on a strong mid-game composition.
Yeah, the thing about Splyce is they've just never been reliant on early game leads. They've always gone towards the late game, like 40 minutes plus is typically what you'd expect from a Splyce game. And even though we've seen them in the past make plays in the early game, and we've seen them try and force a couple things here and there, we never see them snowball early game leads and use that to win games. It always devolves into late game team fights. But with the early game lead that they've built up, I want to see them start being a lot more proactive. At this point in the game, given the item spikes that they're hitting, they could feel pretty confident to try and force a couple of 5v5 fights. They do have to be careful of things like the Jax Trinity Force and the GangPlank Trinity Force, but you compare that to the other side of Splyce. Camille with a Trinity, Orianna already completed the Morellonomicon versus only a tier and a more defensive itemization on the side of Betsy, and also Essence Reaver already finished for that of Kobbe. And you've got a lot of damage already available on Splyce, so let's see if they can force a couple of fights right now, and typically outside of what they're used to doing.
But before the 20-minute mark, it's difficult to force these fights. We said Splyce would want to fight around the Baron. Now, Giants can open up the map. They can hold lanes near their second-tier towers. Splyce might actually struggle to actually force the 5v5.
That is true. So what you typically do is you then start to push your vision line up. The big objective right now is to get mid lane tower and securing the next Drake if you're Splyce. It is spawning in about a minute's time. Giants have already set up a lot of vision around the area because they know it's something that Splyce are going to want to do. So what you're going to see from Splyce is to push out all of their lanes and then reclaim a lot of their vision, because once the lanes are pushed, Giants are forced to catch, and it effectively becomes your turn to set up around that objective. So Splyce, that will be the next game plan, and their dream scenario is Giants come to fight them, rather than just giving it away for free. They want to secure that objective along with the mid lane tower, and then once they have more control of the map, then you look to push in that deep vision, and that's how you use early leads, rather than just allowing the opposition to just freely farm in their lane.
Well, Splyce are going to push for this mid lane tower. Xerxe winding up the slingshot, but shouldn't need to use it as the tower is going to go down. Splyce 3 towers to 1 up, a 4,000 gold lead, or 3.5, and an Infernal Drake now available for them.
And given that Steeelback has been spotted in the top lane, that makes it very easy for Splyce to freely take vision around the dragon area. Should be an easy pickup for them. Djoko might get caught.
He's going to leap away. He'll be fine for the time being. But because Steeelback's so far behind, they need to put him in a side lane. They need to get experience and CS onto him. And it allows Splyce to do things like this. This is such a strong Splyce. This is a Splyce that a lot of people expected to see from the start of the split. Experienced heads, playing strong early games, hitting the ground running. And it's only taken them 5 weeks to get there, Vedius.
But this is a great example of how you just use strong laners to build yourselves early leads. Yes, the gank from Xerxe, or the counter gank rather, did help them a lot, and was a big reason as to why the bottom lane of Splyce was able to put down that much pressure and force the swap out. But you don't necessarily need kills. You don't need a jungler ganking all the time in order to build early leads. Just playing towards your strong lanes, using wave manipulation and just pressure to secure early towers is a great way to build up an advantage that Splyce are doing so very cleanly right now. And it's very nice to see. It's just very low action, which obviously a lot of people always want. So maybe Steeelback can change that. Stealthing up, looking for a side lane, something that Splyce have to make sure they respect.
It's on the ambush, but he was hiding. He's now trying to hide in a bush as well. Odo being very safe here. He has had some struggles this split thus far, but is looking a lot better in this game, a lot more
He's got a
willing
carry,
to step
that's
back.
why. He's much happier. He's like, I'm not on a tank now. I actually get to dash and move and have fun.
It's only his second Camille game.
But it's his,
100%
so
win-loss.
well, you're telling me it's his second funnest game. Of
That's his second funnest game. If funnest was a word, that is what I would be saying, Vedius.
So Odoamne right now doing very well in the laning phase. His Trinity Force will be a little bit delayed because he went for an early Tiamat for a bit of extra wave clear. But now, look at all the deep vision coming out from Splyce. This is what we talked about. Giants, they're just trying to stall. They're mitigating their losses right now. When you have losing lanes, what you typically want to do is lose gracefully.
Yep.
You accept the fact that, you know what, we can't fight you, we can't go for towers, we can't look to contest, so I'm just going to pick up as much farm as I can. I want to make sure that I'm still even on experience and gold. And I just want to make sure that for the most part, the gold gap doesn't snowball out of control. The issue for Giants right now is that Splyce are actually being very proactive. They're being pretty aggressive, so that gold gap just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So Giants, their best case scenario right now is to either find a pick or hope that Splyce make an overextension that they can then look to punish with things like the Twitch ambush or perhaps the Ryze ulti.
Kasing does have the tools to save someone who gets caught out, though. Whimsy always there, Wild Growth, Redemption now as well. The shield from Help picks. There's a lot of opportunities for a Splyce member to get healed. You've even got the shield from Nisqy as well. And Cell Division if it's Xerxe who's getting caught out. So, although there are opportunities for Giants, they are perhaps few and far between. But Giants have been good at keeping up this warding line, keeping vision in the river, trying to spot out any invades coming out from Splyce. You can see that they know Splyce will want to play around this side of the map because Baron is up in a minute and a half's time.
Look at that Djoko vision score, juicy. Love that stat, great point out there from Medic. It just allows us to see how much investment the Djoko is putting in to make sure that they have some control over their half of the map.
You never say that about my vision score. I just want to say, like, I get 100 in all of our games, just because I go 0-5 in lane.
As a support main, that's really not the best. We can keep track of the supports this game and see what a typical pro player aims to get in an average game time, and then we can compare to see how well you compare.
But if mine's better than theirs, you still won't say that I'm better than a pro player.
That's very true. That is
So
definitely not what
I get nothing out of this.
That's very true. But we all, as the viewers, get to have fun in mocking Medic. And that's always a fun experience. Now Splyce grouping up as a 4-man unit to try and siege onto this mid lane tower.
Giants are trying to react with 5 men of their own because that wave is pushed away from the tower in the bottom lane, which allowed Ruin a bit of time to come up and help out his team. Does have the cannon barrage if they need to clear out waves as well. Interestingly, Targamas is still only level 8, so doesn't have the second oracles for his team, doesn't have that sweeper. Can only sweep one spot at a time. Here comes Steeelback. This is the risk of the 1-3-1 that we talked about. Odo's going to get opened up on. There's the spray and pray, but Odo's going to try and turn it back around. Hexing Ultimatum comes down and Steeelback's down! Odo looking for the 2v1 outplay. Can he jump onto Ruin as well? The cannon barrage, the jump, the Odo get dunked!
That was a fantastic outplay from Odo, going back to his roots, making a statement. Odoamne's here and he's ready to play. 2v1 gets the outplay. Splyce are going to secure a tower in the top lane. Everything falls apart for Giants.
And Splyce with such a strong early game, playing to their win conditions. The highest gold lead they have had at the 20-minute mark this split. Now looking for another engage in the mid lane. He's going to bring Targamas back. There's the redemption, the shockwave. Janna is down and Splyce are just opening up in all 3 lanes. They take all of the towers in a matter of seconds. This is the Splyce we wanted to see.
Giants are being dismantled right now, and it all comes off the back of that man in the top lane. Remember, this is Odoamne's second funnest game of the split, and it's likely going to become his first after making plays like that. It is difficult to argue to put him on a tank when he continues to have these kind of performances on camera.
Well, he's already got double the amount of kills he got last time he played Camille, so that's double the fun, Vedius.
Now, Steeelback, he's only level 10, doesn't recognize Trinity Force Power Spike, baby. Look at the damage coming out from Odo. He knows that with the damage output and with the CC he has, he can easily get the outplay, and that passive shield coming up huge in that 2 versus 1.
Adaptive defense is doing absolute work, and still across the rest of the lane, Splyce are in such a meaty advantage. 70 farm between the two AD carries, even 30 farm lead here for Nisqy, which he has continued to develop throughout this game. 7,000 gold ahead. Splyce now can definitely force this Baron fight that they have been looking for since minute 1.
And one thing I forgot to talk about Medic, because it's just so old school, is the ball delivery system. The fact that Zach can jump in, bring a target back, you put the ball on top of said targets, instantly into the shockwave. Splyce have a really easy way to force a lot of these fights, and now with the massive lead that they've been able to build in the early game, Giants are struggling for answers. They can't play the 1-3-1. They're going to be forced to group, and that is the kind of situation that Splyce very much would like.
Setting up that deep vision as they push in the lanes. They'll now go back towards the Baron. Giants always struggle when it comes to Barons later on, and Splyce are just trying to make sure that there is no 50-50 here. They want 100% secure on this Baron.
Now both the bottom lane and Xerxe should be in the fog of war, and Giants will not be able to see this Baron going down. Xerxe using the range of his slingshot to take a creative path and not get spotted out. Giants will now know, but they're not in a position to contest. Splyce take a very clean objective.
Splyce's 10th Baron of the split, Vedius. One more than Giants have taken. So Splyce definitely going to win. That's how it works, right? More Barons, more wins.
Do you want to cast a curse? Is that normally how?
I just want this game to go on for as long as possible.
I mean, I've just been very impressed with how cleanly Splyce have been utilizing their early lead. Giants have been known to be very proactive in the early game off the back of Djoko, but they drafted towards losing lanes. They picked themselves the Twitch, knowing that the Xayah was on the opposite side. You said how it was odd for Ruin to be playing a GangPlank. Typically, he's known for being a lot more lane dominant on things like the Gnar, and instead, he decides to put himself in another losing matchup, and we saw it during the early laning phase. They expected Splyce to not punish. They expected the Splyce from last week, where Vitality could just gain control over all across the board and just dismantle Splyce. But that was not the Splyce that showed up this week. These guys are aggressive, they're looking for a win, and I feel like this is a much more confident Splyce than what we've seen before.
It's a great adaptation as well from them, because before they have played to their win conditions, they played to the late game, and that's worked out for them. But here, they've said we're going to try a different style and we're going to use it to take down Giants, whose mid-game has not been as strong. They're going to get an inhibitor tower down at 24-minute mark. Odo's getting opened up on down here in the bottom lane. He's going to fall, but the inhib will go down for Splyce, and they should be able to retreat back from this one. Djoko's on the chase, Betsy there as well, but 4 members of Splyce will be able to back away.
Now Odo recognizes, okay, maybe 3 is my limit. I can win the 1 versus 2, but definitely can't afford to push it. It will result in his team securing an objective elsewhere though, so definitely good guy Odo helping out his team. Splyce now continuing with the pressure though. They have a big minion wave up in the top lane. Shockwave does whiff from Splyce, but they've done their job. They forced Giants back, and now they have their eyes on the inhibitor.
Second inhibitor in a matter of seconds. Splyce using every little bit of this Baron. Still have a minute and a half left on it as well. Can go back, can look towards these third items already. Luden's Morello finished on Nisqy. Essence Reaver, Rapid Fire Cannon finished on Kobbe. Up towards the top lane, you've got the Trinity Force and the Sterax on Odoamne as well. Splyce are in such a strong position right now.
Dragon control has been great. The early game has been great. Odo did lose his life, but it wasn't a pointless death. You can see that Giants do not have the best mid-game. You were highlighting it before, but this time around, what typically happens for Giants is they get themselves an early game lead, they then make a big mistake in the mid-game, trying to force a fight that perhaps they shouldn't have, and then they stall out and wait for late game. But they don't even have that opportunity. It's Odo's just going in.
Jumps all the way in with the flash hexagonum. Here comes the realm whoop, and that will get Betsy away.
Oh, it doesn't.
He's back.
But he doesn't realize.
But he's fine.
So, turns out, ulti from Camille does in fact stop Ryze from teleporting out.
Yep.
Odo didn't realize that. So he decided to walk away. Betsy with a bit of a magic trick there, disappearing, reappearing again in the same spot.
He's a wizard, Ari.
Yeah, well, unfortunately for Odo, he won't be able to secure himself another kill. Love the aggression from him, though. Very similar to what we saw from him in his Vladimir game last week, just diving straight onto mini true backs. This definitely seems to be like a reformed, a new revitalized Odo. Now in the mid lane, putting a bit of pressure down as Splyce look to secure themselves their final inhibitor of the game.
And they've just snowballed this game from early advantages from that single kill down towards the bottom side of the map. That's all they needed to really take this game to Giants. Third inhibitor is going to fall. The Baron has fallen off as well, so Splyce have to be a little cautious, but you have 2 waves of super minions already pushing in. That third wave from the top will join them in just a moment. Now looking to close this one out.
Baron has worn off, which does make things a little harder for Splyce. But they're just going to continue pushing in. Minion waves slightly desynced with each other, but you've got top and bot pushing in at the same time, which is more than enough to allow Splyce to go onto the tower. Now Giants have to try and force a play now.
Djoko's going to jump in. There's the counter-strike onto Xerxe, but already Nisqy's taken out the jungler, and Giants just can't do anything. Odo kills Betsy off towards the top side in a 1v1, and Splyce are looking to close this one out. The double shockwave, the double kill. Splyce only going to leave Ruin alive, but they will ruin these Nexus towers, and it's taken them 5 weeks. But Splyce are finally awake in the early game as they take down Giants in a dominant performance.
27 minutes and 3 seconds. That may very well be our fastest, or at the very least, one of our fastest games of the split. And it was Splyce that gave it to us. The late game team, the team that has not really shown an ability to snowball an early lead. This is a brand new Splyce that has come into week 5, halfway through the split. And they're going to end their first half with a full record, and they're now going to equalize with Giants.
That was the fastest game of the split, according to my stats, by about 2 minutes or so,
Minutes, damn.
And it's topsy-turvy, it's upside down. Splyce are the team that get the early advantage. They're the team that snowball it. They're the team that take the victory, basically doing to Giants what Vitality did to them last week. And Giants had a poor early game after Djoko died. Weren't able to get any early advantages and looked a lot weaker than we've seen them look in the past.
But I feel like a lot of it comes down to the draft. Giants ended up in a situation where they had 3 losing lanes. The Orianna, I was a little against at first, but Nisqy made it work and allowed a lot of pressure to come from Nisqy in the middle lane. The early rotation of the Xayah paired up with the Lulu gave them a lot of strong 2v2 power, especially with Giants picking the Twitch into it as well. I feel like once again we're seeing Splyce rely heavily on their draft and taking advantage of it in the current meta.
For our first matchup, our analysts have selected Odoamne, Nisqy, and Kobbe as your options